Okay, going live. All right, we are going live on YouTube right now. It's linked from the Facebook page, which is as long as this continues to work, this is what we'll do. Just because we were having so many issues with Facebook and losing audio or having the video cut out in between. I'll go ahead and call to order the City Council Redistricting Workshop for October 25th, 2021. Absent objection from the council, my goal on this is to make it much more roundtable. I've got your mics all set to push to talk. You just hit the mic button and chat. I think we will be more productive in this sort of meeting if you're just talking as you want. If that doesn't work and everyone starts arguing and fighting and stuff, then we'll all just go home. No, I don't think that'll be an issue. You've already been accused of being grumpy? So just a couple things. I sent out an email to y'all that had the current population numbers and some information. You should have some pieces of information on your desk right here. Go ahead and hit your mic if you're going to talk, if you don't mind.
Well, I had some, suggestions I had drawn up for, maybe the redistricting. I was just kind of trying to get some opinion from other people if they thought this was a good idea or not.
Sure. Let me go ahead and start with the head notes and what we're looking at. So with the 2020 population is 19,251 folks. If every ward were exactly equal, the number would be 4,813. So 4,813 would make them all equal. Currently in Ward 1, the population is 5,102. Ward 2 has 5,633. Ward 3 has 4,414. And Ward 4 has 4,102. There were discussions over comments about whether we needed to do that or not. The high number to be in compliance with the 10% rule, which is typically thought of as a safe distribution, it would put the max amount per ward at 5,553 and the least amount at 4,572. So all this is on your map in the top right corner there. I sent out an email with a few different links that just had different considerations. There were some folks saying that they weren't quite sure about whether or not what some of the common factors were. And so I just threw some things. Any inclusion or exclusion on that list does not necessarily mean my endorsement or opposition to the viewpoints expressed therein. In fact, some of the links I didn't even read before sending them. I had Sarah Smith, Chief of Staff, check out some of them, and I was reading some of them over the weekend and today. Anyways, the general idea of redistricting is that generally each person should have one vote, like one person, one vote. When a ward's really big, that council member is elected by more people, which consequently means the people in that ward have less say in what this board decides. And so that's sort of the basic idea of where we get to. The goal for this meeting is to do two things. The goal is not really to talk about different maps or different proposals. It's to talk about the redistricting factors, kind of figure out some sort of scale of where the council thinks which ones are more important or less important or come in tie. The goal then is to take that information back that the council's given and put together a map based on those criteria that is presented in another meeting like this, which would be the launching off phase for actually sort of talking about the different districts and that sort of stuff. So what we've done is you should have a little redistricting worksheet that has a number of different common redistricting factors. What you will not find on there are those things that are legal minimums, right? And so if there was a factor that you either did it and you were fine, or you didn't do it and you failed, like it wasn't a constitutional redistricting, we didn't consider those here because it's pass-fail. We're not trying to prioritize that. Any maps that the city would propose to the council or that staff would propose to the council would obviously take those into consideration. On the other side, some of these factors are typically considered in legality issues, but there's still different ways you can prioritize just how important that particular factor is. And so we've thrown some on here. We left some blank spots in case y'all have thought of some things that we didn't include on here so that we could do that. So with that, I just want to move on to identifying and discussing some of the different redistricting factors. Y'all have a sheet here. What we may do is I may just go down the list of the stuff we have here and then just give a brief explanation, and then I'll just be quiet for as long as humanly possible, so it'll be about 10 seconds. But compactness is a common redistricting factor. Compactness is basically the shape of the district and the closeness of the district boundaries to its center point. So a circular district is the most compact. Everything is no further than, the opposite of that would be maybe a starfish that had, its center point here and then lots of little legs. We've all seen districts that wind and do crazy stuff. Another one is preservation of neighborhoods and communities of interest. I pulled this from one of those documents you all saw that says a community interest is a neighborhood, community, or group of people who have a common policy concerns and would benefit from being maintained in a single district. The next one we had was preservation of cores of prior districts. And this basically refers to maintaining the districts as previously drawn to the extent possible. But in almost all cases, keeping the sort of the center of the district, more or less, the core. Simplicity of boundaries is a factor that would prioritize sort of longer, simpler boundaries over maybe more detailed and complex boundaries that might have sort of jagged edges. A good example of a nice, simple, smooth line might be Ridgeland. One side of the Ridgeland is Ward 4, one side of Ridgeland is, thank you, is 2. And we can all think of what those lines are that hit those areas. Those are kind of nice, smooth, easy to understand. The alternative is if you are trying to maintain some other priorities and you've got the sort of that nice, smooth boundary as the at a higher priority, there might be occasions where you might want to jag in and jag out to preserve or include a particular area in a particular ward. There's, what's the next one on this list? Incumbent preservation, which is to preserve current council members. There is equality of population, which is to prioritize getting wards as close to equal as possible. For example, we know we have to be plus or minus 5 from the mean, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily have to break every bone in the body to get to make sure that every ward had 4,813 people. Or maybe it does, and so that's something that we want to talk about, is how important it is to get that precisely on the dot versus just within a broader spectrum. And then expected growth. We know that there's some areas of town that are going to see very little, or we anticipate seeing very little residential growth over the next decade. Perhaps a landlocked ward or ward that's mostly built out. And then there's other wards that have area that we know is going to fill in. So it may be the case that we don't want to aim for getting everything equal. You might want to say a ward that is anticipated to grow over the next decade can be a little bit lower than a ward that is maxed out there. So these are just some of the common factors that we've kind of combined, and I'll go ahead and open the floor to if there's anything that we've missed or anything that anyone wants to add. Please just turn your mic on and let's go.
I've kind of worked up some suggestions on how we could possibly make a few adjustments from one ward to another.
You're talking about looking at the map?
Right.
I'd like to say, this is a council's meeting, so we can go into that. The goal, I think, was to not discuss particular areas as opposed to discussing the principles that form the foundation of where those areas are going. But again, it's the council's floor.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I'd just soon have the floor open to any discussion. I mean, even if we come up with a solution tonight, I think that would be great. So,
Sure, there's no way we could possibly come up with a solution tonight unless you guys have all the census blocks and data and everything.
No, well, I mean, we could have it in general or whatever, but
sure.
So I don't see that we need to rule out boundary talk and that sort of thing, because I think, in my opening comments I'd like to know how this was done 10 years ago. I was hoping Alderman Saunders would be here.
It was a Metro Plan provided a recommended map, and it was brought to the council. Mayor Watson's here hiding in the background. I talked to him about it as well, and that's my understanding of how it happened a decade ago.
Yeah, my thoughts were, did we just make minor adjustments, or was there some kind of wholesale revision? I don't think there was anything wholesale on that revision, but anyway, my opening thoughts are, I'd just like to keep the thing as stable as possible, while maybe giving those wards that need more people some more people, and giving those that can't grow, try to give them the opportunity to grow. And kind of like you said, we may not need to start with all equal, as long as one ward has a chance to grow or whatever. So, for example, it seems like we're growing to the west and to the east, as I kind of understand it. So that's why Ward 2 is high in numbers, and why Ward 1 is high in numbers, because my ward's growing out toward I-40, and it may be possible to not only give Ward 4 some more people, but to give them the opportunity to grow by expanding their area down into that new area down there by 430. So anyway, I think this could all be done without any wholesale changes, to where the people, the wards who've elected somebody to serve them, can generally keep the people they've elected, and vice versa. Those are my opening comments.
Sweet.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir. Ma'am?
is there a deadline on this? When would this have to be
The
done?
timelines that I've seen for municipalities just say well before the election.
I think Ward 3 is pretty landlocked. I think we've grown as much as we're going to grow. So if you're going to give, if Ward 3 is going to grow, it's going to be that we have to absorb some from other wards. That would be the only way that I could see in the next 10 years Ward 3 growing at all. So yeah, we are the landlocked ward.
I would agree. There may be a way to take Ward 3, maybe expand it to the west there, just through a part of that. I'm not sure what the population would be in that area, but to get them to the west. I don't know how much growth there might be outside the original boundaries, or if you're getting close to being landlocked there.
Councilmember Williams, did you have anything else?
No, I don't
Okay.
think, I'm just trying to consider. I mean, the only way it looks like to me that it would grow would be to absorb, well, I mean, we could absorb any of them.
You're in the middle. You
We're
get
right
to
in the middle. We
pick
can
and
just
choose, huh?
pick and choose where we want to go. I would prefer that it go to a denser population than to maybe go out southwest that way, where there's not as much population out there, unless that we expect that to grow at some point. That would be the only way that Ward 3 could grow.
I like seeing those communities that are already, I say communities, the neighborhoods that are established. If it's possible to keep the neighborhoods together, that's kind of the way I like to see it go, rather than to split up a natural neighborhood. And something, the mayor mentioned this, something I thought about earlier today was, obviously, and Councilmember Mosley mentioned this, wards 1 and 2, just because we have the vacant land right now, those are the ones that a lot more development is going to come to. And I was even wondering if we needed to target wards 1 and 2 to even be a lower number than 3 and 4, because that's just where the development's going to continue to go. When you look out in Country Club of Arkansas and then further towards Interstate 40, you've got a number of developments that are having streets put in right now that just haven't got the houses built yet. And then likewise in Ward 2, it's the same way. We've got a lot of streets and neighborhoods and new areas going in. So we know those are going to continue to grow. And Councilmember Williams, like she just mentioned, Ward 3 is pretty much landlocked and built out. Ward 4 is kind of the same way. You got the new annexation, but I don't think we're going to see any activity there for a little while. But I like seeing communities stay together rather than starting to divide them up. If there are any natural boundaries that we can look at that keep those common communities, neighborhoods together.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we should like split up Country Club of Arkansas or split up, Maumelle Valley Estates. I think neighborhoods like that should stay together. And I think they would prefer that too. I'll read this. I got a text today from a constituent. It's pretty interesting. I'll share what she said. She said we need to do things. She couldn't make it tonight. She apologized to me for that, but she said we need to do things that make sense and have the lines follow logical boundaries as much as possible, and keep areas with similar interests together for the purpose of wards. In my opinion, Country Club of Arkansas does not have the same issues as Rolling Oaks, for example. We do not need to gerrymander and make decisions on what is on the best interest of our politicians, but rather what is the best interest of our residents. If that means incumbents have to run against other seated representatives in the next election, so be it. So, but I agree, that point that she made, that the Country Club of Arkansas does not have the same issues as Rolling Oaks. If we wanted to even look at that, at issues of each ward and maybe make lines that way. I don't know how we would do it, how you could separate one from the other, but Ward 1 has a lot of empty space with a lot of room to grow, and so does Ward 4. Lining them up together may be a little difficult.
You mean Ward 2?
I mean, Ward 4 and Ward 2. I mean, Ward 1, right? Isn't that the pink? The dark pink?
Yeah, no, that's Ward 4. It's
Ward
up
4.
north.
That's Ward 4.
Of course,
I meant Ward 4
most of it's
and Ward.
industrial
Yeah, it's
and
industrial
Ward,
park.
You and you is who I'm talking about. Ward 1, Ward 4.
I don't know how many different issues we have in Maumelle. I think we've got kind of a diffused situation out here. We don't have racial areas. We don't have blighted areas. We have some areas that maybe have bigger houses than others and smaller houses than others. So I don't know that people in Country Club think any differently than people in Maumelle Valley Estates and in between. I've never noticed any difference in my wards. When I'm campaigning, I get the same answers from everybody throughout my wards. So I would make a note as far as, as far as your comment about Country Club. It's a big area. Tommy Wright's actually here in the audience tonight. He developed most of that. Some of that area is all, it's all been called Country Club, phase 1, 2, 3, 4, that sort of thing. As you move down Country Club Boulevard, things kind of change, and I'm not sure even the areas beyond where the new roundabout's going to be are even under the same POA. I think the POA for Country Club pretty much ends at that point at that new roundabout where that's going to be, and all the newer neighborhoods have their own separate POAs and things. So there would be a logical division in that area over there, and I would think it would be the roundabout actually, because it's just a different. There's a different feel from to the east of there and to the west of there. I would be in, so I don't think it's a big deal to divide it up, but if we can keep it as contiguous as possible, that's fine. But what I was referring to earlier is Ward 4, perhaps taking some area of Ward 1 to give them some more people along, and this would be, Ward 1, or excuse me, Ward 4 is actually at the entrance to Maumelle, and it's still on the eastern boundary. So you could just attach it and take in some of that newer area and make Ward 4 down into some of that newer area. And I'm not sure how much residential can be really developed out at White Oak Crossing. That would be for the developers to tell us, because there's a lot of bayou in there, and I think there's hopefully going to be a lot of commercial in there. I would be curious as to whether there's going to be some houses eventually down there in that area at the big interchange between I-40 and 430. There's those little neighborhoods that are over there by CAC, and I'm wondering if there'd be some housing that would maybe go in there. I'm getting a nod from Mr. Wright out there. So there is opportunity to grow in that direction, I guess. So I guess I'd suggest just keeping my ward mostly intact, and maybe giving Ward 4 the chance to grow down into that area, as well as picking up a few current houses.
Well, the one area I had a question about is, and I know you and I discussed this back around the campaign, the division at Kingsland, that the southeast side of it is in Ward 4 and the northwest side of it is in the other ward. And yet it's pretty much a common neighborhood. So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, all of that neighborhood, and you got Stony Ridge Lane and all of that in there too. And you would think that would be in the same ward, but it's not. That would make sense to me for that to be in
At least to Woodland.
Ward 4.
Yeah, at least up to Woodland,
Right.
further if needed, but.
Right, I agree.
Naylor is kind of a good division point between 2 and 4. That would, if everything to the north of Naylor / Millwood, and that it kind of goes back to keeping communities together, like you were saying, Doug.
Yeah, and that's a very good example of that right there.
But we need to look at the we're kind of all, that's why I know the mayor mentioned this, we're kind of all just shooting
Looking at the map.
in a map, and we don't know what the numbers are. So, I agree kind of having a higher I'm getting my words all mixed up, a higher overview of what we're trying to accomplish, and let them do the GIS work on the background and bring back some, an option or options to us. But, I think when you look at this, to me, just some natural communities jump out that you could make some changes to and see what that does to the numbers. I don't know how we would get Ward 4 to go all the way from Diamond Point Drive in the far northwest side of the city all the way down to the southwest side of the city. I don't know if that's a logical way to try to expand Ward 4 or not. You're covering basically the entire city from one end to the other with one ward if you try to do it that way.
Right.
But I just think we need to come up with more general direction for the mayor and the staff to go with, and bring us back some options, or an option.
Well, if I can tag on to that, Ward 3, it's always confused me that, High Trail and Leisurewood, and those that are just right up Washita, right across Millwood from me, were not in Ward 3, and they were actually in Ward 2. Right. Yeah, and that just seems to be a dog leg there, that actually, if I was going to be the center of it all, that should be part of Ward 3 as well. That would be a natural boundary to me.
Yeah, that's my thinking too.
So, and that brings up a different factor. So, the way the census blocks work is they look for, and using census blocks as the basis for our map is easiest. It's not required, but generally that's what most people do, and then they only vary from the census blocks in those situations where it's just impractical to stick to them. A census block in a city that has a nice grid, a whole bunch of streets running this way and a whole bunch of streets running this way, a census block would be, get this, a block. Because there's a road that kind of completely surrounds an area. if you look over there, for example, at Ouachita, and then look for if you were to go around the block, what that looks like, and you'd be going all the way down Odom, you'd be coming up Naylor, you'd be swinging down, including all of Leisurewood, back around. You'd go up Southland, you'd come back down, you'd go up High Trail, you'd come back down, and there you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a number of locations like that that are just the way the census block is going to put something on one side of the street in a different census block, and therefore, so we can vary from that, but it's a lot more complicated on the back end. So it's just something to consider. There's a lot of those. I used as an example Stone Ledge, for example, where Stone Ledge could end up in one ward on one side and then the other, and then Stone Ledge ties in with some of the homes on Shady, Pleasantwood, Highland, parts of Millwood, etc. on down. But I haven't heard any additional factors that weren't included on the worksheet or that y'all thought were important.
I think you covered it. It's pretty thorough. But if you're talking about different streets, you know, like Ward 3 is one side of Arnold Palmer, and Ward 2 is the other. So, you know, you're talking about streets separating wards. That's a good example of one.
They also separated the neighborhood when they did that. They separated Club Manor right down in two. So there's no perfect way to do it.
So most of what I've heard us talking about is preservation of neighborhoods and community interests. Seems to have been, if I was taking what most of, am I getting feedback here? Hang on. There you go. Most of what I've heard is talking on that point. What about some of these other points? And I'll just, you have just chime in.
Yeah, big question I have, what are you looking as the end result of this? So we're not looking at the chart, the maps. Did you want us to prioritize this?
The goal is to make sure we identified the common factors, and I didn't just tell you, here's the only things that we should be considering.
Okay, this is a very comprehensive list.
I think so. We tried to think of other things that would be included on that weren't simply you must or must not do, like the legal bright lines aren't considered for weightiness. Those are pass-fail, and so we're just assuming that the map we give is going to check all those requirements. So the goal was to talk about these and then figure out what prioritizes different over certain things. The great example is simplicities of boundaries, or here you go, equality of population versus expected growth. Let's talk about those for a minute, because hopefully that's uncontroversial. If you get exactly all of the wards with the same amount of people, then you're not accounting for expected growth, right? And so if y'all were to say, hey, it's really important to us that we account for expected growth, those wards that we anticipate seeing the most growth on are the ones that should have the least. That way, kind of, I don't know, at the midpoint in 5 years, everything is roughly equal at that point. That's a different approach than saying, hey, the goal is going to be to get everything as close to possible as 4,813, right?
Maybe we could go down your list in order of priority, what we think is the most important and what is the least important, because like you said, this is a very comprehensive list. I don't know what we could actually add to that.
All right, yeah.
And I think expected growth could be very high on the list, and preserving the neighborhoods. That could be 1 and 2.
Yeah, I think future-proofing the ward map would be important to consider, because we know what development's going on right now, and 1 and 2 are going to continue to grow because of just that's where the growth is. No offense to 3 and 4, y'all are built out for the most part, so we're trying to figure out some ways to spread that out.
Too, you know, we've got
Get your mic.
I'm sorry. And the Bradley properties
Right.
and the Pinnacle Heights, you've got to think about those annexations coming in, and those, I think, Ward 4 is getting all of that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, their growth is gonna be crazy.
There's
in the
potential there,
future.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think it's important for, well, I'll say it's important. I think at the end of the session, when we have an approved map, maybe 1 and 2 should be smaller than 3 and 4 for that reason, that we're expecting some growth to come in there. I don't know if that's something we put as a priority, but, when I say smaller, it probably wouldn't be by, 100 or 200 or something residents maybe, I don't know. But just allow for some future proofing there so that in 10 years, it's not lopsided again,
Well, and allow Ward 3 to absorb some of Ward 4 so that they can continue to grow since we're pretty landlocked.
Yeah, oh, sure.
I agree. Unless that's and is it what you said?
I think we're on the same page.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
That was a good thought, Councilmember Williams.
And I like
We're on the same.
simplicity of boundaries is good too.
Just
I mean,
repeat what
keep
you
that, we don't wanna get them too crazy.
As far as the new,
If you could hit your mic. If I get a lot of feedback, I'll just clear the mics out.
Okay. One factor I'd like to add is to try to keep politics out of this. We've got some natural divisions on the council. There's some differencing of opinions, and it's pretty much equally split. And we need to make sure that this redistricting isn't, that there isn't a group that's trying to nudge one alderman out of an area and that sort of thing. In fact, I would say if we nudge an alderman out of his ward, we ought to renumber all the districts and just everybody start from scratch.
How does that work? How has that worked in the past? Caleb, do you have any idea?
I know that last time no one was removed from their district, and I don't know about what happened in 2010, or in 2000? 2010 someone was? He who is keeper of the chronicles of the past.
I'll answer Councilmember Mosley's question. It was a major redistricting we did in 2010 because our population grew 6,626 people from 2000 to 2010. You've only grown 2,088 from 2010 to 2020. Councilmember Brainerd lived in Country Club of Arkansas, but he was in Ward 3 at that time when he was elected. He was elected in 2010 to a 4-year term, but then that ward got redistricted to Ward 1. He had to run again in 2012. So there was someone that lost their position. He was the only one, but it's because we had to make major changes. And also at that time, we knew 1 and 2 were going to grow. There was no doubt. So we put them at 5% below what the equal portion would be. And now you see they've still overgrown that, so that's where your growth was. 3 was always landlocked once we drew it in 2010. There was no new development going to occur in 3. So that was the history behind it. And we did a special census in 2006 and we had 15,115, but they won't let you redraw your districts with a special census. We had to wait till the decennial census, or decennial, however you say that, census. But it was and Metro Plan did it all, and they used census tracts. That's why Ouachita, one side is in one ward and the other side is in the other ward. That's why there's splits, because they use city center lines of roads to develop the census tracts.
Well, I would think Metro Plan didn't take any of these things into consideration, such as keeping neighborhoods together and, they don't live here, so I would imagine.
Well,
Did the council have any input on that?
oh, yes. No, they drew up like 4 maps. And here's option A, here's option B, here's option C. And no, they did keep, they do this for 15 communities in central Arkansas on a regular basis. Every time there's, so they know what you're looking for usually. You want to keep neighborhoods together if possible. You try not to kick a sitting alderman out of their ward. That's their goal too at that time, but it doesn't always work out if you have to make wholesale changes. So, but they did not give us one map and say, this is the only one that'll work. They actually gave us one that had equal populations in it. Then they gave us one that did, and that's when we sent it back to them and said, we want wards 1 and 2 to have like 5% less are basically really 10% less than the other two, and let them grow to that position. So.
We clearly did, right? And
Oh,
we exceeded, right?
Well, of
So-
course, because you gotta think, Country Club of Arkansas has developed well beyond the ballpark, since 2010. And, Maumelle Valley has probably done 10 phases since then, or something like that. I mean, I know they started about 2002, 2003, but
Right.
still, their growth, and we were doing 300 homes a year in between 2000 and 2010, roughly. On the average, we're doing 300. So that's about 1,000 people a year moving in if you do the 2.58 people per household. And so that's what you got to look at and then we slowed down in 2008 basically because of the economic crisis that was going on. We didn't slow completely down, but we went down to less than 100 homes a year for a while. Now we're working, I think they're coming in about 100 a year now. That's what they're coming in at.
So you said y'all went to 5% below in 2010 for 1 and 2. That's
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
That's good to
We,
know.
we tried to allow for growth.
Yeah, sure.
That was,
Well,
because
it
we
makes
knew it was gonna
sense.
happen.
You know it's gonna happen, right?
Yeah, Ward 3, only way it's gonna happen is if you tear down a bunch of houses and build apartments. So is that gonna happen?
Let's just give them some land and let them grow that way.
Not that I'm aware of. Anyone watching at home, that was just a hypothetical.
Oh, what about that country club spot? Put a high rise in there, 100 stories. All right, I hope that gave you some history, Councilmember Mosley.
Do we have a map of what it was before it is now?
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm sure the file cabinets back there's got it in there somewhere.
I'd like to dredge that out to see how it's evolved.
Okay.
Metro Plan might be a way to get it,
Okay.
so.
That was a big change, though. Mr. Watson, you said that was a big change, though, 2010. That was a pretty, yeah, it's okay, yeah. That was
It was about a
significant.
60% growth?
Ward 3 from the east side of the boulevard all to the west side.
Ward 3 was all on the east side?
No, it was on the west and east side.
Oh, okay.
So I guess we went across the boulevard right there by Kroger or somewhere right in there. Because it went across, because that area had developed a country club. But I lived in Ward 3 and I stayed in Ward 3 and I'm in Edgewater, just down the road from Councilmember Williams here. And so, but I stayed in 3, but it had included Country Club of Arkansas. And so then they tried to get everything on one side of the boulevard because those apartments they constructed across from Lake Valencia,
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are in Ward 3 now.
they are? Okay. Yeah, so see, it went across there, but yeah. So that was all in there, but they trying to accommodate for all the growth of Country Club of Arkansas.
I guess I'll get some people when the Pfeiffer edition grows. They'll build that in there, behind the old Kroger. That's in Ward 3.
Yeah, and y'all had Carnahan Village
Yeah.
somewhat recently. I remember saying there could be no growth out there, and then Carnahan Village popped up. And, not that that's a massive
It's quite
subdivision there.
quite
Yeah.
a-
And there's already been population change we anticipate since the census, right? So what we were supposed to give them back in 2019 was the homes, I believe it was the homes that would be under construction by April of 2020, I believe was the time frame. So we certainly know that there were homes that came in May of 2020 that weren't included. So we'll be making those sort of estimates too, as well as trying to predict. There's some subdivisions that we have a pretty good indication of how many homes are going to go into. We can take, for example, out at the end of Ridgeland, Pinnacle Heights, we've got that plan's already there, so we can count those homes and get some estimates. It's more difficult in the areas that we don't have plans, or subdivision plans. We don't really know what exactly or how dense that'll be, but we can still come up with some estimates for those areas, such as the other area that we recently annexed in, the Bradley property. That back part is residential, but we don't have any plans being submitted at this time. Nor do I expect any anytime soon. Famous last words. Got you. So we were kind of trying to go down this list, and I believe Councilmember Williams had stated expected growth and preservation of neighborhoods and communities of interest were her 1 and 2.
My 1, 2, 3, and that sort of thing is, I would like to see incumbent preservation. Of course, expected growth. I'd like to see no politics in this exercise. And preservation of cores of prior districts.
I guess we should add politics to this list, it's not on here.
It's not on there, I'm adding it.
What do you mean by no
Yeah,
politics?
yeah.
Well, I would imagine in any local redistricting that there's going to be people that would like to increase their political strength through redistricting by perhaps edging a council member or an alderman out of their ward to get them out to not serve their remaining term and that sort of thing. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. That's why I guess I'm saying incumbent preservation. I'd feel much more comfortable about this process because there are aldermen here on the committee that recruited people in the last election to try to change the makeup in the council, and I wouldn't put it past them to do so in this process, just to put it out on the table.
So with all due respect, Mr. Mosley, and this is, I can see both sides to the incumbent preservation, but it seems awkward to say incumbent preservation is important, but no politics. Those seem kind of like similar things.
Well, that
I
goes.
get what you're saying also, and really quickly, because we haven't talked about it, I've heard different things about this, and then I think there's a good reason to consider incumbents, and there's good reasons not to. And you can add more to this list if you so choose, Mr. Mosley. I think one good reason not to consider it that is that you can end up with some kind of wonky wards or wards that are built and designed, districts that are designed to protect certain people and not necessarily putting the residents as, and what the communities of interest are most important. Conversely, one really good reason to keep incumbents is that the incumbents are the elected representative of the people that voted them into that position.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, I can see both sides of that, and I think it's important because it's some subtext going on here is to point out, I think there's good reasons for both. Or, you know, I think you can make a legitimate reason for both, a well-intentioned legitimate reason for both protecting it and not. The reason that I clarified that question on politics, I just want to make sure that as we're going back, and if that's the consensus, let's not bring politics into it, and I go sit down with the GIS folks and we start mapping it, what that means to us as we're trying to give the council the map that they really subconsciously are all in agreement with.
Well, I guess really, you know, that no politics would come under preservation of cores of prior districts. In other words, don't slice somebody off if you know, keep the incumbents in there for the people that elected them. Basically, like you said, that would be playing politics to strip somebody out, and they've got to start with somebody new, and you've put say a couple of incumbents against another incumbent in another ward. So it just that wouldn't be right.
I think it would be a good idea if we all gave our top 1, 2, 3. So you have
Let's
mine,
go.
you have Mr. Mosley's.
Yeah, I wish we had the other two aldermen here.
I've got, and so let me be 100% clear. The goal when we come next time is to have a map And then if you guys want to start butchering it, the goal is to have the GIS software, and we can end up with something completely different than what was proposed. That was just designed to give, and really the goal in working through this format was to say, let's focus on the principles and the priorities, and if we do, there's no room for politics, right? If one of these factors is something that everyone thinks is just the bee's knees and must be, then we'll draft the map in accordance with that and trying to keep all the other things there. It comes in, and if that's what the council wanted, everyone should go, perfect. That's exactly what I was thinking.
It would seem to me that we could do, former mayor said something about they were presented with 4 options.
Sure, so if you remember at 2 council meetings now, I've recommended 2 different ways that we could go about this. One is we present 3, is what the number that I suggested. We could internally put together 3 different maps, bring them to the council, and let that serve as the launching ground for the discussion. The alternative was that we could come talk about the priorities and the principles and the factors and prioritizing those, and then we could use that to form a single map to talk about to use as a launching ground for discussion. It was my understanding after following the first council meeting that the council wanted to go with this method, and then I clarified that at the second council meeting where I brought it up, and then we actually set and scheduled this. So that we could switch gears if that when Mayor Watson was talking about that, I was like, man, that might have been the easier route, but I'm not so sure it would have, but yeah.
I'd like to hear what Mr. Mazzoni and Mr. Tierney and maybe Mr. Shin have to say about all this.
I like the first 4 points of the list as written. That's my main concerns.
Pardon me?
The list that we were given, the first 4 points are my first 4 points. So
1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
That's good.
I'm simple.
Well, hold on, since I think someone mentioned 3. 3's a nice number. Are you saying that 1, 2, and 3 would be your priorities?
Yes.
And that's compactness, preservation of neighborhoods and communities of interest, and preservation of cores
Yes.
and prior districts. Wait a minute.
I'll take a starfish if I have to.
Yeah, but so if you're putting compactness as your most important thing, you're saying,
Not my most important.
okay,
I mean, well,
it's one of your top 3.
Let me back up.
It's number 1.
Simplicity is not important to me.
Okay. The simplicity is not.
Right.
So I'm actually gonna write all this down.
The first 3 in that order.
Should be done. I mean, I'm sure we've all got ideas like, why don't we pull from here and put it over there? I've already kind of drawn up a map of where I think some changes could be made. Maybe we can provide all those to you, so that when you guys come up with a map, we won't be going, oh, no, I thought you should have done it this way. And maybe we can kind of save some time by doing it that way.
Well, like you said, I think that'd be kind of hard not knowing the numbers.
So if you'd
Right.
like, let's come back and you could give those suggestions, if you don't mind, if they're easy to describe after we've done this. And then Jason's supposed to be keeping good notes on the extras that we expected.
So your 1 and 2 is same as mine.
Okay, what were his 1 and 2? I've got 3 for him.
His was 2 and 1, mine were 1 and 2. Preservation and expected growth.
Okay.
Preservation of cores.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your number 3?
Input from the council. But if you had to pick another one, then I'd probably, go with preservation of neighborhoods.
Oh, okay, so that does make ours different.
And then, Councilmember Williams?
My number 1 is expected growth, and number 2 is preservation of neighborhoods, and number 3 would be equality of population.
Councilmember Gardner?
My number 1 would be preserving neighborhoods and communities of interest. Number 2 for me would probably be simplicity of boundaries, making them more simple and using natural, boundary lines. And then 3 for me is probably expected growth. I like that idea of trying to target, 1 and 2 to probably be 5% below 3 and 4, because we're trying to future-proof it for
Right.
10 more years. So
I found that really interesting that the largest two wards were also the ones that were the lowest at the time. Councilmember Mazzoni?
Yeah, one or two are easy. Simplicity of boundaries, expected growth is number 2. And then the third one gets... I'm gonna go with preservation of cores. See how this all comes out.
And then I had on handwritten notes, Councilmember Mosley's were no politics, preserve cores, and incumbent preservation. Is that right, Mr. Mosley?
And expected growth, there were 4 of them.
I wish I would have put numbers on this, but I deliberately used bullet points so that no one thought that they were prioritized. Okay. Councilmember Tierney, you said you had some suggestions.
Oh, yeah, I'm not wearing strong enough glasses to be able to read all these different streets. Let me just kind of pass this over to you. And again, like I say, I do not have access to population numbers, but these are just areas that I thought pulling from wards 1, 2, and into 3 and 4, and where you had wards with higher populations going into wards with smaller populations. It all just depend on, as you tell, I've got a lot of vague areas, like maybe move over here if we need to pull more people over. It all just depend on the numbers, and try to take into consideration all the other things that we've discussed during the meetings of maybe some hot spots of heavy population areas that would fit well to meet all the criteria everyone has expressed.
And then you had, just for those that, you had the High Trail Ophelia area going from 2 to 3, and then the Montpelier Marseille area going from 1 to 4. And then, if needed, the Scenic Ridge area moving to 3. And of course, you didn't have the numbers and stuff, you were just kind of looking at the neighborhood.
Yeah, I'd like to see this myself.
You'd like to see it?
Mm-hmm. I should have done the same thing.
Well, I figured, they're gonna be working up some maps. I thought, well, we'd get some input from the council people about what we think would fit well into our wards and other wards, and, still at the same time maintaining all the criteria that we've expressed as priorities.
I would go to 3. What, you got some squiggles over Maumelle Country Club, what's that mean?
There was something I just crossed out, yeah.
Oh, you're, okay. Yeah. I don't have any problem with that. My idea was to, as far as how my ward could help out, would be to, again, kind of make a dividing line at the proposed roundabout and give Ward 4 room to grow out to the east. Because Ward 4 actually comes down and butts up against Ward 1 all the way from, basically from the boulevard all the way to I-40. So that would be a logical extension of that. Anybody that gets that area out there, it's going to look like a gerrymander anyway.
Now, that is an area with a lot of potential for future growth.
Pardon?
A lot of future growth potential in that area too.
Yeah. I'd probably cut my area down below, or I don't know, I'm not sure how many people live in all those neighborhoods.
You're talking about everything from after Salone.
Yeah, either after Salone, or we could also make it west after Salone and west of Country Club. That would keep me in the chalets and that sort of thing. depending on how the numbers work out.
Yeah,
But it would give them.
my guess playing on with it, and I didn't play with this, that would make Ward 4 probably it'd probably take out substantially, and then also means that Ward 4 would be the ward that you would expect the most growth, because you expect the growth here, and then in the north, the new annexed areas. But yeah.
And then, you know, I don't know how to do between 2 and 3 would just be to pick out certain neighborhoods. And I don't know, you know, I don't know if you need to separate the smaller housing neighborhoods or the older ones from the newer, bigger ones and that sort of thing. It might not hurt aldermen to represent both sides of the spectrum.
Pardon me?
Oh, I've just, you know, yeah, I think there's probably going to be a tendency to just move some of the older neighborhoods to Ward 4. And I don't think it would be bad to let Ward 4 have some more variety, some more diversity or whatever, economic diversity.
Pinnacle Heights, we'll be getting some diversity.
Yeah, depending on how fast it comes in.
Has anyone else input?
I'd just say I like Mr. Tierney's plan. It's as good as any.
Thank you.
I think it's gonna be hard for us to kind of look at the map without knowing numbers of these neighborhoods that we're talking about. So, you know, I think at this point we let GIS run with it. You know, one thing I would say, I think it's important that whatever we do, and I know that we're going to do this, but to have a very public process with how this is all done. You know, and if we propose something, you know, have a public meeting just for that. And is this going to be about ordinance? Is that how you would change it? Okay, so of course that'd go 3 readings just on that itself. But I think even before we get to that point, just having an open public process where the public is allowed to come and view the changes, make comments, suggestions, whatever. I think that's really important to have. I think the League of Women Voters thing included that, you know, just making sure that it's all done in a public forum so that the public can have input on it.
I don't object to doing that at some point, but, you know, we're in the early stage. It's kind of hard to even, you know, there's nothing being presented at this point. So maybe as we get some proposed drafts or something like that. But again, we can do this very simply. I don't really want to make this a big deal. Again, we're pretty much a population here that doesn't have any extremes in there. We're all mixed together, I think. So there's a lot of things we don't have to consider here that maybe the city of Little Rock's having to consider. I've been reading about them. I have a feeling it's going to be a big fight.
Was there any other discussion on these priorities or any other factors to consider?
Oh, you might call these guys and get some out of them. Where are they tonight?
Jess is at home.
Pardon?
Jess is at home right now.
Okay. I'm just saying we're missing input from two aldermen here tonight.
Yeah.
So are you not going to consider anything they might have to say?
Well, I'm not going to call them and have illegal meetings about something that they didn't come to the council meeting to talk about. We'll have a complete opportunity, and I assume before the next redistricting workshop, we'll have another council meeting and perhaps several after that. I do see a hand in the audience. We hadn't discussed public comment. I don't have any issues.
I think that's a good idea.
Miss is it Landis?
Yes. My name is Pat Landis, and I'm here with two hats on. I'm with the League of Women Voters, and I live in Maumelle, so.
If you
I'm
could
just
pull the
like-
mic down in front of you a
Yes.
little bit better so everyone at home can hear what you're saying.
First of all, I want to thank you for being good government. I mean, what you're doing right now may not be real exciting, but by establishing criteria, you're giving a message to the public that this is what you're going to use to draw the maps and review the maps, and that's what they should use too. And not all governmental bodies are doing it step by step. But it's easy to get to the right map when you've got the right criteria. So thank you so much for this, and thank you for your comment about public input. People are really interested in this, and they're real intrigued by it, and they want to know how the decisions were made, and I hope that you bring the public along with you. And again, thank you for all your work.
Thank you. All right, so I guess we'll move on to the timeline discussion. I think we would all agree that some governmental entities have timelines that say when they're supposed to have this done. I was watching a thrilling webinar link that Jason sent, and it got to the timelines for municipalities, and it said in all caps, well before election. And this was in Arkansas GIS. I think we would all agree we want it redistricted well before the election, well before the filing period, which opens in July. That said, what I'm trying to feel out from y'all is whether this is something that we're trying to knock out and have the next meeting in November, December, because we're coming up on budget meetings, we're coming up, I think staff and our internal resources can turn it around in a couple weeks, depending on what's coming through the planning commission. I might have done that. I might have put them in a bind as they're cringing. But you know, I think we could certainly have something in November if that's what we wanted, or we could slow down a little bit. I will point out that in an ideal world, we'd come back with a map that meets everyone's criteria, that everyone looks at and goes, oh wow, this is perfect, and then leaves. I don't know if we'll hit the ideal criteria, but we need to allow time for perhaps subsequent meetings from that, allow for 3 readings and 60 days for it to be challenged. So you're going from July to, oh gosh, May? I shouldn't count back months. And so the ordinance passing by May, 3 readings means running it in April. And that's assuming that someone doesn't make a change on the 3rd reading or a 2nd reading that sends it back to the 1st, which means you're looking at running something before then. So I'm just interested in whether y'all think you'd be ready to meet again next.
I think this was a good first, because y'all have work to do now. And I know it's budget season and staff has a lot going on. This is the first step. I don't think we need to rush into it necessarily, but we do need to get something out by April the 1st, if I'm, understanding the timeline.
How long will it take to come out with the first
We
map?
could probably have a good first draft next month, late next month.
Late
Right on
November.
Thanksgiving.
Okay,
We can all eat and then come up here.
yeah, that's a good idea.
Right,
Have it
yeah.
out, yeah.
Have fun by yourself.
Yeah.
Well, what about, instead of having a separate meeting, why don't we just start one of our budget meetings, maybe a half hour early, just to get a look at what you've got and decide what we need to go from there?
Let's do that, 5:30.
Okay. That sounds like a glutton for punishment, but I like it. I'm here at 5:30. That's combining a budget meeting and a redistricting?
Are we asking too much of city staff, though? I mean, because y'all
I
have a lot
think-
going on, so
I think we can reasonably anticipate having something by the end of November without breaking backs, and that's including, I hope they're listening, because I'm looking for slight up and down head nods or head shakes. No, I didn't see anything.
they separate.
Is it realistic that we can have something by the end of November, late November? Someone should.
It is.
Okay.
Actually, it may be, Jason may want to comment to that, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And my goal here is to say a date by which we know, or a time frame that we know it'll be done by.
So Yeah, so end of November, as long as we've got a coalesced agreement on what you want to see, we should be able to produce 2 or 3 maps pretty quickly, and then if you want to shoot for the end of November, that's fine. The one caution I would say, if you don't mind me just speaking
Please.
off the cuff, would be the longer we take, the longer it's also going to take Pulaski County and their elections office to set their voter precincts. So that's something we need to be cognizant of, that we're just one cog in the wheel, working from the city wards up to the county voter districts, and also right now the state legislature's working on the state senate and state house. So the more we can coalesce stuff and have ours set is going to make it easier for everybody else that's above us. But as for the mayor's question, I mean, end of November should be no problem once we know kind of where we're headed and looking at the census blocks and whatnot. So.
Got you. Thank you. So we'll aim for something at the end of the November, and I think it's something that we can easily get a draft out so that people are able to look at it before a meeting, and we could pass it out or have an initial discussion at a budget meeting, or just email it, or just make sure it's disseminated so you're not walking in and seeing something, although that might be enjoyable for me to watch everyone's face. We can get something to y'all before the meeting so you've had a chance to look at it.
Now, would there be any benefit with doing both? We do it and see what MetroPlan comes up with and options, or would that just convolute the process way too much?
We can do whatever you'd like. Yeah, well, I mean, so you're talking about give them the list of these priorities and then have them come up with something?
We'd look at ours and go, hey, that's something we didn't think of, or would that be, yeah, they look pretty much, it's the same program, it looks pretty similar to what we do.
You can. What they don't have is what the neighborhoods are, right? Like, so they're just looking at a map. It'd be like you redistricting a map of Toledo, assuming you've not lived in Toledo. And so you're flipping things around, but you don't know whether that fits more in this area or that area. But yeah, you can have them put something together. And they'll probably call us and ask us how they want us to do it. And then, yeah.
Yeah, so
It'd save time.
Would it, if we just did it ourselves?
Yeah, definitely would probably save time. We don't want to procrastinate on this, and so,
Yeah,
the less
yeah.
convoluted you make, the less likelihood we'll drag this on too long.
We have the talent in-house, good talent.
Well, and
in-house.
so Jason worked on the redistricting in Conway.
Oh.
He and Mayor Townsell were the ones that handled that, and they came up with multiple different maps and went through that process. And so I've been talking with Jason about how they did that out there. So he's done it before for a bigger entity. Not as well. I was going to say not as good, but I would never say that. Okay, we'll reach back out to you. I think we have some votes as to what folks think are important and not. Any final words?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will bring this subject up at the next meeting, probably in alderman comments, to see if we can't get some input from the 2 aldermen that weren't here, and that can be on the record then for public viewing.
Certainly. Sounds great.
We'll do that. We need to involve them in the process. Mr. Saunders has health issues. He comes to some, he can't come to others. I don't know where Mr. Holt is tonight, but I mean, I think it's important that we have input from all 8 aldermen.
Thank you, sir. All right, I'll go ahead and close this out. Thank you all for coming.